There's a moment right after you finally walk away from a narcissist when you brace yourself for a fight. You expect the anger. You expect the calls, the messages, the accusations, the chaos you've come to know so well. You prepare yourself for the worst version of them because that's the version you've been dealing with for so long. And then something happens that you are not prepared for at all. Nothing. Silence. Or worse, something that almost looks like relief on their end, like you leaving didn't devastate them. It barely registered. And that silence, that absence of the reaction you braced for, can hurt more than any explosion ever could. But I need you to stay with me today, because what actually happens after you walk away is far more layered than it looks on the surface, and understanding it is going to change how you experience every single thing that comes next. Because here's the thing almost nobody tells you about leaving a narcissist. The reaction you get isn't really a reaction to losing you, it's a reaction to losing control. And those are two completely different things, even though from the outside they can look identical. Someone who genuinely loved you and lost you grieves the person. A narcissist who loses you grieves the function you served, the audience you provided, the control you represented. So when you finally walk away, what you're about to witness isn't heartbreak in the way you understand heartbreak. It's something closer to a system losing access to a resource it had come to depend on. And the way that system responds follows a pattern so consistent, so predictable, that once you see it laid out, you'll recognize it instantly, whether it's happening to you right now or it already happened months ago and never fully made sense until this moment. The first thing that tends to happen, and this one throws people off more than almost anything else, is the calm. Not sadness, not anger. Calm, sometimes even coldness, like the relationship meant nothing at all. And if you're the one who left, this can be devastating in a very specific way, because some small part of you was hoping, even if you didn't want to admit it, that your absence would matter to them the way their presence mattered to you. That calm feels like confirmation of your worst fear, that you were never really valued in the first place, that you gave everything to someone who can apparently just shrug and move on without you. But here's what's actually happening underneath that calm surface, and it's important you understand this clearly. That calm is not evidence of indifference. It's evidence of shock, processed through a system that has spent years perfecting the art of appearing unaffected, because appearing unaffected has always been their primary defense against ever looking weak, ever looking like they need anyone. The calm is armor, not proof. The second thing that happens, often within days, sometimes within hours, is what I'd call the narrative scramble. Because a narcissist cannot tolerate a story where they were left, where someone found them replaceable, expendable, not worth staying for. That story is unbearable to a self-image built on being irreplaceable, being the one who leaves, never the one who gets left. So the story gets rewritten, fast, and it gets rewritten for an audience, not for you. Suddenly, to mutual friends, to family, sometimes even to themselves in the quiet of their own mind, the narrative shifts. You become the unstable one, the difficult one, the one who couldn't handle a real relationship. Or maybe the story flips entirely, and suddenly they were the one who was going to leave anyway. You just beat them to it. It doesn't matter how contradictory or how quickly the story changes. What matters is that the version where they were left behind, powerless, unchosen, gets erased and replaced with literally anything else. The third thing that happens, and this is where things start to get genuinely unsettling, is the information gathering phase. This is the part where, even after everything, even after the relationship is supposedly over, you notice they still seem to know things. A comment that references something you only told a mutual friend. A post that seems to respond to something you said privately days ago. A sudden reappearance of someone in your life who seemed to vanish right when you needed them most, now suddenly curious about how you're doing. Narcissists rarely walk away from a source of information cleanly, even when they've walked away from the relationship itself. your life, your emotional state, your next steps, all of it remains valuable data. Because losing the relationship doesn't mean losing the desire to know exactly how much damage was done and exactly how much power they still hold over your emotional world, even from a distance. The fourth thing, and this one is particularly disorienting if you don't understand it going in, is the sudden reappearance of charm. Not immediately, usually, but often when you least expect it. Sometimes right when you've started to feel stable again. Right when you've begun rebuilding a life that doesn't revolve around them. Out of nowhere, a message, something soft, something that sounds like growth, like reflection, like the version of them you always hoped existed underneath everything. And I want to be honest with you about why this happens, because understanding the timing here is everything. This reappearance is rarely coincidental. It tends to surface precisely when their supply elsewhere has dipped, when the new source of attention has cooled off, or when your own visible healing, your calm, your moving on, your apparent thriving without them, has become its own kind of unbearable evidence that you didn't need them after all. The charm isn't remorse. It's a recalibration attempt, testing whether the door you closed might still have a crack of light coming through it. The fifth thing that happens is something a lot of people don't expect at all, and it's the moment where a new person enters the picture, often faster than feels emotionally possible. And I know how much this can wreck someone, watching someone move on to a new relationship, a new admirer, a new source of validation, seemingly within weeks of a relationship that took you years to build and months, maybe years, to recover from. But here's what's essential to understand about this pattern, and I really want you to hold on to this. The speed of that replacement is not a reflection of how little you mattered. It's a reflection of how little any individual person actually matters in that particular structure. The role matters. The function matters. The supply matters. And because it was never really about you specifically, replacing you doesn't require processing a real loss the way it would for someone capable of genuine, individualized attachment. It just requires finding the next person willing to fill the role. And that brings us to the sixth thing, the one that ties every single piece of this together, and the one that explains something that has probably confused you more than anything else on this entire list. Because underneath the calm, underneath the narrative scramble, underneath the information gathering and the sudden charm and the fast replacement, there's a much deeper reason all of this happens exactly the way it does, every single time, with almost eerie consistency. And once you understand that reason, something is going to click into place that changes how you see every single moment you've lived through since you walked away. That's exactly where we're going next. The sixth thing, the one underneath everything else, is what I'd call the permanence of the void. And this is the piece that finally explains why every single reaction we just walked through, the calm, the narrative scramble, the information gathering, the sudden charm, the fast replacement, happens with such consistency, almost like watching the same script play out in different relationships, with different people, in different circumstances, every single time. Because here's the truth underneath all of it, and it's not an easy one to sit with, but it's an essential one. A narcissist's sense of self was never actually built on solid ground. It was built on a constant external feed, admiration, attention, control, validation, an endless stream of input from outside sources, because the internal structure that most people rely on to feel stable, a settled sense of who they are regardless of who's watching, was never fully developed in the first place. That means the moment any single source of supply disappears, whether that's you walking away or anyone else, it doesn't register as a normal, painful, human loss. It registers as a hole, a gap in the system that must be filled immediately by whatever is available, because an unfilled gap threatens the entire structure holding their sense of self together. This is why the calm looks the way it looks. It's not that losing you didn't matter. It's that the system cannot afford to sit in the discomfort of that loss long enough to actually process it as loss. So it moves immediately into management mode instead. This is why the narrative gets rewritten so quickly. Not because they're strategizing consciously step by step, but because an unbearable version of reality, the version where they were left, gets replaced almost instinctively with a version the system can actually tolerate. This is why the information gathering happens, because monitoring the damage is a way of maintaining a thread of control even after the relationship itself has ended. This is why the charm resurfaces, because your continued healing, your continued indifference, becomes its own kind of unbearable gap, a door that used to be open and isn't anymore. And this is why the replacement happens so fast, because the void doesn't care who fills it, it just needs filling, immediately, by whoever is willing. Once you see all 6 of these things as expressions of the exact same underlying mechanism, instead of 6 separate mysteries, something really important starts to shift in how you interpret everything you've witnessed. You stop asking, why didn't they care about me the way I cared about them? As if there was a version of them capable of that depth of attachment who simply chose not to extend it to you specifically. And you start asking a much more accurate question, which is, was there ever a structure there capable of that kind of attachment at all toward anyone? And for most people who've lived through this, once they really sit with that question honestly, the answer becomes painfully, but also strangely freeingly clear. I want to be really careful here, though, because I don't want this to land as an excuse for how you were treated. Understanding the mechanism behind their behavior does not mean the pain doesn't count, or that you should feel sorry for someone who caused you this much damage instead of grieving what happened to you. What it means is something different and honestly more useful. It means the calm you witnessed wasn't a verdict on your worth. The fast replacement wasn't proof you were forgettable. The narrative scramble wasn't proof you were actually the difficult one all along. All of it was the predictable output of a system that was never capable of holding on to anyone the way you were capable of holding on to them. That distinction matters, because it moves the explanation from something wrong with you to something structurally incomplete in them, and those 2 explanations lead to 2 very different places in your healing. Now, I want to talk about something that doesn't get discussed nearly enough in conversations about walking away from a narcissist, and that's what happens to you specifically in the space after all 6 of these reactions have played out. Because here's what a lot of people don't expect. Even once you understand everything we've just covered, even once you know intellectually that their calm wasn't real, that their fast replacement wasn't a reflection of your value, there's still a strange kind of grief that lingers, one that isn't really about missing them anymore. It's about grieving the version of the story you wish had been true. The version where leaving broke something in them the way staying broke something in you. And I need you to know that grieving that fantasy is a completely normal part of this process, not a sign that you haven't healed enough, or that you secretly still want them back. What actually marks real healing isn't the absence of that grief. It's the moment you stop needing them to have felt what you felt in order for your experience to be valid. Your pain doesn't require their mirrored devastation to be real. Your love doesn't require proof that it wrecked them the way losing them wrecked you in order to have been genuine, generous, worth something. You don't need the void on their side to match the void you're carrying, because those 2 things were never built from the same material to begin with. Yours came from real attachment. Theirs came from lost supply. And once you stop measuring your healing against a reaction that was never going to come the way you needed it to, you finally get to put all of that energy into the one place it was always meant to go, which is building a life so full, so stable, so genuinely yours, that whether or not they ever feel the weight of what they lost stops being something you need an answer to at all. If this helped make sense of something that's been confusing you since you walked away, you're far from alone in it, and there's so much more we can untangle together. Make sure you're subscribed because we go deeper into this every single week.